Welcome to Manifested Publishers.
How are you, learners? Welcome to the Manifested e-learning platform. We are going to continue with the subject geography. The topic is statistical methods. And in our previous lessons, we've been studying the methods of collecting data. We gave a list of methods that can be used to collect data. On top of the list, we had questionnaires. We say that questionnaires can be used to collect data, and this method is commonly used by researchers to collect data. Now, learners, questionnaires can either be prepared in written form, or the researcher can collect data verbally or through audio recording. So when collecting data, the researcher can have a list of questions on paper so that the respondent can answer the questions in the presence of the researcher or not. Alternatively, the respondent can be recorded so that the researcher will have audio, the answers to the questions in audio format. In our last lesson, we studied the types of questions in a questionnaire. We say that there are two types. Number one, the open-ended questions. Number two, rigid questions, which is said also known as structured questions or closed questions. At the end of the lesson, I gave you an assignment which I'm sure you must have done, because a good student is one who takes instructions. Today, we want to study the advantages of questionnaires. What do we want to learn today? Advantages of questionnaires. Questionnaires, I repeat, is a method that is commonly used to collect data. So I want you to write down advantages of questionnaires. Today we are going to study advantages of questionnaires. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to give examples or give advantages of questionnaires. Advantage number one. The first advantage is that the researcher is able to seek clarification of unclear responses. The researcher can do what? The researcher can seek clarification, of unclear responses, The researcher can seek clarification of unclear responses by asking supplementary questions or additional questions. By asking supplementary questions. This is especially where the questionnaire is that one of the one that has open-ended questions. So when the researcher asks a question and the respondent has answered that question, but the answer is not clear to the researcher, the advantage is that the researcher can seek clarification by asking supplementary questions. like, what do you mean? That is a question. Or you can ask another question. Okay? For example, let me use the questions we gave last time. We gave examples of questions like, which of the following products are sold in the market? All right? We gave another example. How far do your customers come from? So if the answer is not clear to the researcher, then the researcher can ask supplementary questions. That's one advantage of using questionnaires as a method of collecting data. Number 2, the researcher is able to win the respondent's trust and dispel any fears that the respondent may have. Because remember here, learners, sometimes the respondent answers questions in the presence of the researcher. So since the researcher is available, he can instill some level of trust in the respondent so that the respondent may not have fears. Okay? To dispel fears that the respondent may have. Dispel fears that the respondent may have, because the researcher can explain to the respondent, for example, the objectives of asking the questions. And the researcher can also inform the respondent that he will maintain confidentiality of the information that the respondent may give in the questionnaire. So when the respondent is having fears, an advantage of using a questionnaire is that the researcher can do what? The researcher can win the trust of the respondent and dispel any fears that the respondent might have. What did I say? I said the researcher is able to do what? The researcher is able to win the respondent's trust. The researcher is able to win the respondent's trust. Respondent is the one giving answers to the questions. The researcher is the one gathering or collecting data. So the researcher is able to win the respondent's trust. And how does the researcher do it? And let me write and win confidence. Okay? And win what? And win and we said dispel any fears the respondent might have, and any fears that the respondent might have. Moving on to the third advantage, learners, is that direct contact with the respondent provides the researcher with an opportunity to gauge the accuracy of the answers given. The direct contact, because we said that the respondent may verbally ask questions. So that direct contact with the respondent provides the researcher with an opportunity to gauge the accuracy of the answers given. direct contact. Direct contact with the respondent. Respondent provides the researcher with an opportunity to gauge the accuracy of the answers. The accuracy of the answers given. Direct contact. When you come into direct contact with a person, sometimes you can know whether the answers that the person is giving are accurate or not by studying the body language. Sometimes you can study the body language of the respondent so that you can tell. Sometimes you can tell when someone is not telling the truth. We are talking of accuracy of the answers. You can tell when someone is guessing. You can tell when someone is sure about what they are saying. Why? Because of direct contact. The advantages of talking to person face to face. Because you can read, you can study what the person's intentions are by looking at the language of the body, because the body also communicates. People don't just communicate verbally. No, you can communicate through the various gestures. You can tell when someone is not comfortable. You can tell when someone is comfortable. You can tell when someone is speaking the truth. You can tell when someone is not speaking the truth by looking at how the body communicates. So direct contact with the respondent provides the researcher with an opportunity to gauge the accuracy of the answers given. That is an advantage of using questionnaires. Direct contact. Direct contact. Number 4. Moving on to number 4. What are we studying? We are studying advantages of using questionnaires to collect data. Number 4, similar questions are given to all respondents. Similar questions are given to all respondents. So how is that an advantage? It's an advantage because consequently, comparing or comparison can be made easily. Consequently. Comparisons can be made easily. Consequently. That means thereafter. Thereafter. After what? After the respondents have answered the questions. Then thereafter, comparisons can be made easily. Consequently, comparisons can be made easily. When using questionnaires to collect data, similar questions are given to all respondents. Consequently, comparison can be made easily. That is an advantage. Sometimes it's important to compare data. And you can only compare data if the questions that were asked are similar. All right? Is that clear, learners? Moving on to number 5. Instead of bending, learners, I can use this side. I move on to page 2. Number 5. I don't have to bend because I can use this side. Okay? But you don't do the same in your exercise book because this will be wasting space. But you see, I'm not wasting anything because I will still use the board. I rub and still use the same board. But you see the exercise book, you don't leave such spaces, all right? So learners, advantage number 5. Advantage number 5 is that questionnaires are a useful source of first-hand information. They are a useful source of first-hand information. You get the information from the source. You don't rely on information given by someone else. No, you go to the field, you ask questions, you take the information first hand, not second hand, not third hand, not fourth hand. No, first hand. And first hand information is always very reliable. You are not relying on information gathered by someone else. So questionnaires are used to get information directly from the source. If you are gathering or collecting information from traders, you ask questions like, how often do you have market days? You are talking to the one who goes to the market, the one who sells in the market, right? Get that information directly. The one who answers that question, how often do you have market days, is one who goes to the market. So when you ask that person, then you are getting information firsthand. Which products are sold in the market? Which products are sold in the market? The one who answers that question is a trader. So you are asking directly, getting information directly from the trader. So you are getting information firsthand. Questionnaires are a useful source of first-hand information. That is an advantage of using questionnaires to collect data. Number 6. What are we studying? We are studying the advantages of using questionnaires to do what? To collect data. All right. Is there any question? If there is no question, let us proceed to give the 6th advantage. The 6th advantage, learners, is that rigid questions, when posted to the respondent, reduce what we call fieldwork expenses. Can I repeat? Yes, you can repeat. I can repeat what I've just said. I've said that rigid questions, when posted to the respondent, reduce fieldwork expenses. Rigid questions, when posted to the respondent reduces fieldwork expenses. Rigid questions, when posted to the respondent, posted or sent. When sent, you can send the question through email, you can send the question through post office, you can send the questions in many ways. So when you send rigid questions, learners, you remember in our last lesson we defined rigid questions. We say that there are two types of questions. One is the open-ended questions and the rigid questions. We say that rigid questions are also known as structured questions. We also defined it and say that in this type of questions, a choice of things to answer is given. A choice of things to the answer is given. So this choice is usually given on the basis of yes or no. So you ask the questions, then give possible, or you give list of answers so that the respondent can choose from. And when that happens, we say that it limits the respondent's selection to what is provided, okay? And the respondent cannot deviate from what has been provided. So that is a rigid, those are rigid questions. So here we are saying that rigid questions, when posted to the respondent, reduces fieldwork expenses. That means that the researcher don't necessarily need to travel to go to the field in person. You can prepare questionnaires in written form, or you can send in soft copy, all right, soft copy, or you can have them in hard copies of the questionnaire. They can be sent to the respondents so that the researcher does not necessarily need to go to the field. When the researcher avoids going to the field, then the expenses are reduced, like transport expenses, the meals that the researcher takes while in the field, accommodation expenses, and so on. So all those expenses are reduced when rigid questions are posted or are sent. When posted, let me use the term sent. When rigid questions are sent to respondents, reduces fieldwork expenses. So in other words, learners, this method we can say is cheap compared to some other methods that we are going to discuss in our subsequent lessons. So learners, that will mark the end of our today's lesson. What have we learned today? Today we have studied advantages of using questionnaires to collect data. We've given 6 advantages. Number 1, we've said that the researcher can seek clarification of unclear responses by asking supplementary questions. Number 2, the researcher is able to win the respondent's trust and dispel the fears that the respondent might have. Number 3, direct contact with the respondent provides the researcher with an opportunity to gauge the accuracy of the answers given. Number 4, similar questions are given to all respondents. Consequently, comparisons can be made easily. Number 5, we have learned that questionnaires are a useful source of first-hand information. Then lastly, we've stated that rigid questions, when posted or when sent to the respondents, reduce fieldwork expenses. Thank you for attending our today's lesson, learners. But before we take a break, I'm going to give you just one revision question. One revision question. Highlight 6 advantages of using questionnaires to collect data. Learners, when answering this question, please close your exercise books, close the video, try and see if you can recall what we have learned in our today's lesson from your memory. Try to recall from your memory. Test your recall by answering the questions, this question without referring to your notes. Only go to the notes after you have attempted to answer the question on your own. Thank you for attending our today's lesson. In our next lesson, we are going to study the disadvantages of using questionnaires to collect data. Remember, the topic is statistical methods. This is one of the topics that we learn in geography. Bye-bye.